speaker series, and it's Mike Butorac to talk about the Italian culture and heritage here in Clallam. Before we start, I just want to say thank you for attending and supporting our Carpenter House with your volunteering, docents, donations. We appreciate everything. It helps keep our lights on, so thank you very much. There's a restroom at the top of the stairs. Use it. And that's it. We'll just go ahead and start now with Mike Butorac.
Thank you. First of all, I have to find my wife.
We lost her again.
Because she gives me this much time.
Yeah, just have to know where I'm at, right?
So there's her. So, first of all, I'd like to say thanks for being here. It's greatly appreciated that you have the interest in I guess the Northern Cass County Historical Society is putting this on. We appreciate that because you get a sense of what the community was about, what it's like, and hopefully through this you can get a better understanding of our community, which we really have a lot of pride in this community. I think it was a great place to grow up in, and it's still a great place. And people that move here, hopefully they gain the same perspective or understanding of it that I had when I was growing up. And so it's really been a good place. What I have here up front, just a few photos of family photos, or just kind of a general perspective of my family. This photo right here is a picture of my grandmother and grandfather's wedding in Roslyn. This is my grandmother right here, and there's my grandfather. And this is a guy by the name of John Benatti, who I will refer to upon occasion. And so he was the brother to my grandmother. Okay, so they're connected. So anyway, and I just like the photo because this is up in Roslyn, where they were married. And just
What year was that?
Beautiful photo.
let's see, my mom was born in 1915. This would have to have been 1912, 13, somewhere in that. They were married in Roslyn, but along the way they separated, and my mom went back to Italy. So my mom was born in a little village called Fletto, Italy, which is north of Torino. So she was born there, and she stayed there she was there for about 2 years, and that's when the family said, hey, we can't afford you anymore. You're going back to your husband. So they ended up back in Red Lodge, Montana. See, they were here mining, and then they ended in Red Lodge, Montana, which is a coal mine there. And from there, people died early. So her mom died, and her dad died, and then she ended up in Mooseheart, Illinois, which was a moose orphanage. After she graduated from high school, back to Clallam, where her uncle, John Benatti, was living here. So she came out here because he was here. He was a miner also. And that's how she got here, met my dad, and so on, and here we are. So anyway, that's kind of a family history. That's a photo there. It's a photo of the family in Roslyn on 5th Street. And then a whole bunch of other pictures out in Piano and so on. Drinking a glass of wine would come by naturally and honestly. Anyway, let me kind of get going with this so I don't digress and waste time here. The big question is, why would you ever leave Italy in the first place? Why? You've been to Italy? How many of you have been to Italy?
Yeah, it's like,
Quite a few.
yeah.
Isn't it a great place to visit?
Yeah. Yes.
It'd probably be a great place to live.
Yes.
But how many would you like to visit Italy? If you've been there, it's how many of you have Italian heritage? Anybody? Italian heritage?
Oh, everybody else went there, but I have the
Patrice?
heritage.
Anybody else Italian heritage? None? Kind of surprised.
Oh,
Okay.
that's right, yeah. What are we doing here? No, at least have some. I just found out though. Yes, so.
People left Italy. There was a big migration that occurred in the late 1800s and 1900s. There was a big migration out of Italy. 4 million people left Italy between 1890 to 1910, somewhere in that neighborhood. So it was a difficult place to live. It was poor. People didn't have very much. I have a letter that came from an aunt, and this was in the 1950s, and she had basically a dress and a bed, and that's it. And they needed my mom's signature for some property that they had, so that they could release the property, so that she could sell the property and she could at least have something. And that's about where we're at as far as relatives in Italy. I had Vince, my oldest son, was just there, and he kind of did some searching around and trying to find a cousin here and there, and maybe he would, maybe he can't. Anyway, a couple areas that I've kind of found, and again, all of this is my own perspective. Understand that, because it might be completely false, but kind of my own perspective. Too bad we have this film so that we can caught it. But basically, there seemed like there's a lot of people that left the area north of Torino, in this area right here. This is where my mother came from, in this area of Italy. And it's kind of right at the foothills. In fact, she was in the foothills of the mountains, and my grandfather was right in the mountains itself in Macana. So this is the area that quite a few people have come from. Charlie Glondo, for instance, his grandparents came from that particular area. I mean, there are several people that came from this area. So this is kind of one area in Italy where a lot of people immigrated from. And the other area is south, down near Bari. So there was quite a bit of migration that came from these two areas. I really don't hear very many people that came from Rome or Venice or that sort of thing. So again, that's my own perspective, but a lot, and this was kind of a poor area, Sicily, where it was poor. That's where people left to come to the United States because there were jobs here.
Mike, where did
That
your,
was the main purpose, yes.
where did your son, can you point out where your son just visited?
Yeah, he was just last week, he was right up in, right where my grandfather came from.
Your place?
Right up the mountain, then they went up from there up into the mountains in the Alps. So, we're going there next month. Anyway, let me,
Hey, Mike, so those people that came from those two pockets, were those the 4 million that you're talking about, or those the people that came here to work in the coal mines?
to work in the coal mines, to work in any mining or anywhere there was a job, basically.
Here.
And there was active recruiting going on also.
Yes.
There was a guy from Yakima that I was talking to, and his grandparents, his grandfather, was on the docks in Constantinople, and there was a sign looking for workers at the rosin coal mines or something like that in Constantinople. So there was some active recruiting going on to get workers here, and people were uneducated, they were poor. So go work in mines or where to get. One of the neighbors I had in Teanaway, her grandfather was from the same location that we were from, and he ended up in Minnesota at the iron ore mines there. So, but anyway, that's that aspect. Let's move on here, because we're not gonna be here all day.
I have a quick question. Have they been miners in Italy, your family?
You know what, that I could say. Yeah, I could say that they were mining in Italy. There was, yeah, thank you. I wish, I'll find out. A couple historical stories just as far as this area itself. One of the oldest miners we found was, that I was reading about from a book Craig gave me, a guy by the name of Johnny Crizzetti. He was a coal miner here in Roslyn, one of the first coal miners in Roslyn. He was in the 1890s, 1895, 94, somewhere, and he was a coal miner in Roslyn. His wife died in 1896. He was so brokenhearted, he ended up going to Natchez, up in the valley, up in that area, Nile Valley up there, and he was working up there, and he was quite a guy, so he made it was in his book. One of the interesting things, though, he came back after he was down in Natchez. He came back, lived here for a while. He died in 1950, and he is now buried next to his wife, who died in 1896, and he died in 1950, and they're together in Roslyn. Hard to, Anyway, that's one idea. Another, the Roslyn Bakery. He's a Paneri, not Panerio, Paneri. He came from a village that's probably 20 kilometers where from my grandparents came from, in that area. He operated the Roslyn Bakery for 30 years until 1945, somewhere in that area when he died. When he died, all the Roslyn businesses closed down for 3 hours in honor of him. So I'm sure they had a nice party and a nice gift from him. His son was Pio Paneri, who you probably remember Pio.
And Eliza.
Yeah. So anyway, there's just a couple ideas of those Italians here that I've just saw a little bit on. A lot of the businesses, though, when people came here, the Italians, they wanted the same food. So this is like Merlino's in Seattle. He started importing foods. He was from Black Diamond. He was mining in Black Diamond. He started importing meats, cheeses, oils, that sort of thing that the Italians wanted. So Merlino, he was a miner originally, and he did pretty well. Okay, so that's another one. Now, so on the idea of businesses, so here in Cleellum, we had Preco's, who started the bakery, the Cleellum Bakery, in 1996. So Ivan claims that, so when they started that bakery, that's when things got started, and that ovens have never cooled since. So my cousin, Kay Danubio, she tells me one day a few years ago, my grandfather, Dominic, he built the ovens. I said, really? So, about a year later, 6 months later, I see Ivan, the owner, and Ivan, Dominic Danubio, is the guy that built the ovens. I didn't know he didn't. I don't know. So he said, no, it's documented that this oven came from Seattle and so on. He said maybe he built the building because he was a bricklayer. He was a mason. So just recently I contacted Kay and said, Kay, was it your grandfather that made the building? No. He built the ovens. He always told us he built the ovens. She even called her sister, and her sister says he built the ovens. So We're gonna leave that one where it's at. They have their story, Ivan might have his story, so anyway, the basic idea, you know, Prico's, that bakery has been there since 1906, and it's one of the businesses that has flourished, one of the Italian businesses ever since. There's been many businesses in this area owned by and run by Italians. They became almost like the fabric of the community, the important part of the community. And I want to go through just a few of those. So there's a few. Pete Facero had the grocery store, the Economy Grocery, and we went there quite often. Go in the back door, go out the back door, and Pete on the way out would say, "Hey Daisy, there's some lettuce back there, it's a little old, take it." You know, he was a great guy for, you know, if you had something, give it away. He was a great person. Him and his wife Mary were really good people. So there was Facero's Grocery across the street on First Street. Dan Lenardi had a grocery store, and then right across from my place, Ron Dolly's grandmother, Mrs. Dolly. I always knew her as Mrs. I don't know her first name. And she would sell canned goods, you know, this and that and the other thing. And then there was always a glass of wine in the basement that she would sell. So canned goods up here, you want a glass of wine, and that's why most a lot of people go in there and get a glass of wine. So that was another store, you know, grocery store. The Cleaners in town, Roy and Feeney Lamaco. Many of you might know Lamacos. He was used to be a county commissioner also. Drugstores had Dom Garbalato and John Muss running the grocery stores. Hardware store run by Tony Gelati. Insurance, Momi Zanoco. Anybody know Momi Zanoco? There was another one. Momi would come by and collect once a month, you know, for insurance. So every time Momi comes by, of course, he loved to sit down and talk and laugh. He was a jovial, big guy. Have a glass of wine and laugh about stuff, collect the money, go on to the next customer. That was the insurance business. In transportation, shipping, we had Johnny Matilli and Dip Tapero, who, trucking, so any goods that come in, they distributed throughout the area. Plumbers, we had Eugene Pizzolato. Anybody know Huge? Huge was a plumber, but he had more jokes in him than anybody. He always had a quick comment about something. Him and Ernie Bresnikar. So one day Ernie Bresnikar, he had to do some work for Willits, and so towing. So Ernie goes down and told his car he's trying to pay a bill. So he goes down to get this car, and he hooks it up and everything and takes off. And they had a reel on it. So he takes off, he doesn't set the reel. So he takes off and he all of a sudden snap and it takes a bumper off the guy's car. Ernie says, they don't have these things in the Midwest where I'm from. That's Eugene Pizzolato. He took a lot of photos of girls' basketball teams. He photographed everybody, everything. He took the pictures so that when Chuck Allen went to the University of Washington, he had the film that he could send to him. So he was quite a guy. The banker had A.J. Imony. Shoemakers had Louis Pardini and Steve Pardini, his son, were shoemakers. That's when they fixed shoes.
Oh.
You know? Anybody had their shoes repaired lately? Barbers in Roslyn, there was Dante Panerio. And for mayors, we had Mike Rossetti and Charlie Lund, who was a mayor. So, the other thing that we had along the way as far as the Italian, we get back to it's all Italian, I guess. But we still had to have the same sort of things. Even with my mother and myself, we still want that Italian food. So Faceros would get that in. like he gets salsicci, he'd get salamis, he would get the cheeses. Well, after Facero left, there was kind of a little void in there, and thank goodness that Charlie Gondo showed up in the 80s. So now we had salamis and cheeses again, and so they kind of carried that on. The other business, I guess you could say business, was my mother. She was a seamstress, and she sewed for everybody in town. And when I say everybody in town, I mean everybody. She was a great seamstress. She did cheerleader dresses. She would make wedding dresses. Had one customer that would go to the hot shot place in Seattle, get a dress, bring it back over, have my mom copy it, and she'd bring it back. That's a true story. I think. Some of it may not be true, but I think that's true. Anyway, she was a great seamstress, she really was. Not only was she the seamstress, you know, people would come in and it was like, they went back in, so they gotta change a hem and a dress and that, and then would tell her life story and, you know, 15 minutes, 20 minutes later, where they go. Anyway, you don't get that stuff anymore. You don't have that connection to the shoemakers and the seamstresses and, you know, just Faceros. You know, it's kind of changed a little bit. So anyway, that's what it's kind of like growing up. We had Tianway cheese. Anybody here of Tianway cheese?
I've heard of it, I'm trying to find the recipe.
Good luck. The recipe, Kathy and I had that, we don't have it, but we know somebody that does have it, but it's,
I wrote it down as he gave it.
Janaway's cheese was made up in the Middle Fork. And John Chiklinski, which is now the whole place, everything's collapsed. No, excuse me, not Johnny, Andy Chiklinski, his brother. And so he made this, what they call Tianway cheese, and it was really a good cheese. It's very similar to a tuma, which we find right up in the northern Italy. It's very close, very similar. That tuma that you find in Italy, they price it by age. The younger one is priced less than the older ones. And it's a really good cheese. He had Bocciafermo was helping him make it, so that's the Italian connection. Well, sometime Boccia would maybe have a little too much wine while he's making the cheese. You know how sometimes, you know, when you go to birthday parties, you know, you have a birthday cake and you get the toothpick in it, and you get the toothpick, you win the prize. Well, Botch Vermo, he was out there one day, he had a little too much wine or something. Well, they did drop it wasn't necessarily the toothpick he dropped in, it was that Tuscanelli he was smoking. So somebody cut into the cheese and there was some Tuscanelli in there. Anyway, that's why they have all the laws they have today. Wine has always been a part of the culture. I have a homemade wine right there that we'll sip on here. Wine has been part of the culture since I grew up. And so Cavallini, Adolf Cavallini and Stanley Payson were the two distributors here in town. And so there were boxcars, and I don't know how many boxcars would come in with grapes from California, Zinfandel or Muscat. And I had some slips, I still have them, I couldn't find them, you know, how much they were, 36-pound boxes, and I forget it was. But anyway, not everybody, but quite a few people made wine. And, you know, it's just like a part of life. had dinner, there was a glass of wine. Well, not for me as a little kid, but I think it was probably about 18 or 19 when I decided enough milk, it's time to drink wine instead. So, anyway, wine has always been an important part of our culture, and that's one of the things that I've continued doing ever since is making wine. I enjoy doing it. It's a good activity. Plus, it's good to drink. As far as food goes, not a lot of pasta. And not in from that area of northern northern Italy. Not a lot of pasta. Polenta. If it was Sunday, there was polenta. If we had polenta, it must have been Sunday. Gnocchi. Gnocchi is just like one of the greatest little things you can. Ravioli. Ravioli is a really good risotto. And we always drop the risotto. I call it risotto. Risotto doesn't sound like risotto. Risotto, those are kind of like the staples of Italian food. And that's what we had most of. Bagna, now I have some samples of bagna. Now there's a difference between bagna cotta and bagna. I hear people, great, we're having bagna tonight. No, you're not having bagna, you're having bagna cotta. There's a difference. This is bagna, it's in that blue pot. Bagna cotta is the garlic and anchovies, olive oil, and butter. Bagna is something that when I was growing up on Sunday, we'd leave mass and go down to my uncle John Benally, he lived on 4th Street, and he'd have this pot of bagna ready to go, and it was so good. And it's a tomato base, it had veal, it's made by veal, you know, and now you can't get veal, you have to take out a loan to get it. But there was a lot of veal eaten. But this bagna was like the best thing. Well, we found a recipe. In fact, my mom even brought the pot down to her house after John came down and lived with us. We brought the pot down there, but it was never the same. The flavor was good, but it's just missing something. Then we found a recipe out of one of these Marcella Hazon's cookbooks that's pretty similar to it. And I gave it some, my grandkids tasted it the other day and they gave it a thumbs up, so. So anyway, antipasto, we have some antipasto that we make. Now there's two, Mrs. Excuse me, just a minute. One of the ladies here in this photo, Lena Matilli, right over there. Lena Matilli made antipasto, and she got the recipe from, she was buying jars of antipasto from Torino in Italy. And she kept fiddling with it until she got it right. And that's the recipe we use for the antipasto that we make. So that's what you can, we're gonna test that today too. Lena also had the recipe for the ravioli, which is, you know, not everybody makes ravioli, but how many of you make ravioli? Anybody?
I made
Ravioli?
before. I made tortellini.
Tortellini?
Where you put around, you have to,
Yeah,
each individual one.
yeah. So anyway, we make ravioli, and it's a beef-pork mixture and those are like really good stuff. Anyway, those recipes came from this Lena Matilli, who was the mother to Johnny Matilli and Ernie Matilli, who were cousins to Tony Matilli, who was Tony and Verna were the mothers to
Linda and Jeannie. Linda.
Jeannie, Verna. Okay,
Linda and Jeannie.
anyway, there's a connection here.
Good morning.
So anyway, I don't have any bagna cotta here today, you'd smell that if we had it. Okay, you have torchettis also. Okay, a couple more stories, if you guys ready to quit yet?
No.
We're all ready to.
That's because you need a little glass of wine up there.
If you get too long with this, let me raise your hand. A few of the people that we came along along the way regarding people that we've, you know, it was, when I was growing up, that made a kind of an impression that, you know, they're old people. One was Mrs. Fermano. Mrs. Fermano, she lived over on Railroad Street. And that's her son Johnny. Johnny had some health issues along the way and so on. But we would go over to her house and my mom and her would speak Italian. And I think that's all she spoke was Italian. And they lived, you know, right next to the trains and so on. But she always had the opera going. She had the records going, and it must have been Caruso. And I'll never forget that. We go over there and they'd speak Italian, and I was listening to music, and it was just a kind of a different experience. I kind of remember it, you know, and it just kind of had an impact. So that, and her name, Mrs. Fermano, her first name was Margarita. And the way my mom pronounced it was kind of better than what I can do. Margarita is the way, you know, really pretty the way it came out. So she was one of the people we'd go visit. And then we'd go over and then we would see, well, the other person that had a great name was Bertino. She was, now where did I have that? Hold on here. I'll get back to her. I'll get back to you. She was Piarina. And I don't know how, I saw her, the other day I saw her tombstone up there, and the way it was pronounced is Piarina. Kind of a, but you almost have to look at her name, look at the name, how it's written. And it was always pronounced Piarina, though. It's always a pretty name. I thought, anybody needs it, they're gonna have a baby along the way. Great grandkids or something like that. I recommend that. A couple stories, just one, we had where my uncle John Benani lived on 4th Street down here, a few blocks down. We'd go up there in the summer evenings and that sort of thing and visit, and they would talk Italian. And so where he lived, there was kind of a boardwalk between his house and a kind of a shed. And there was a guy that lived in a house behind him, Friso. I think his name was John Friso, according to he told me. We all called him Friso. And when we were about 7 or 8 years old, Friso scared the hell out of us because he had one eye, he was hunched over, he was old, and that eye wasn't covered either.
Oh dear.
So we, when he came up through the walkway, Linda and I, we'd scatter and get out of the way. So, and as time went on, and once I got to be 12, 13, 14 years old, then Friso didn't scare me as bad as But one of the things I always think about, not always, but thought about, was one day my dad came down and he was kind of upset about something. What's wrong? Well, what happened was Friso was going up on the hill, and he was an old stooped over guy, the way he walked and everything, I couldn't imagine doing it. But he went up on the hill and he would dig out bags of coal. And he'd put this coal in a gunny sack and go back down and heat his house, or stay warm, not necessarily heat your house, but at least you're warmer than you would be otherwise. So he was doing that. Well, one day the railroad owned the land, Northern Pacific, they owned the land, and they caught on to him going up there getting that coal out of the seam, and they buried the whole thing. So what happened at Friso probably froze out, I guess. It ended up being a pretty nice guy. He really enjoyed it. And then there was the other guy that lived, I remember, a guy named by the name of Picholette, and we'd go visit him. He kind of did a circuit. And in summer evenings, you'd go over and visit a couple of these guys. And then there was Picholette, he was about that tall. Somewhere around there, he wasn't too tall. Then we go sit and they'd talk Italian, and he even smoked these Tuscanellis. You ever smell those Tuscanellis? Yeah, they had their own, they're a cigar, but they have kind of a unique flavor to them, or difference. And so he would smoke those things right down, and almost burn his lips off. But he was the nicest, always smiling, happy guy. I don't know. So those are those old Italians that we kind of associated with when I was growing up. Food.
Mike, did
Go.
you have any brothers or sisters?
Yes, where's Linda at tonight?
Where's Linda?
She's
She
not here.
ghosted you. Yeah, pretty much. She has stories.
I had an older brother, Leon. He was 7 years older than I was.
Oh, where?
And he passed away. You know, there's a guy, John, I forget his name, he's in Spokane, and he says, his mother said, John, your bladder is too close to your eyes. Anyway, so food, had pizza. You know, when pizza came out in the 1960s, somewhere in that neighborhood around here. But you know, it's always associated. So where my mom was from, they never heard of pizza. I mean, so anyway, she decided she was gonna make pizza one day for us. She put it in, kinda like that. See that blue iron pot over there? Kinda like that. And the crust was about that much sauce and about that much cheese. She takes it off and she says, I don't know. And Leon says, Mom, I don't think this is it. You know, that's the last pizza from her. But as far as Italian customs go, kept some on Christmas Eve, generally fish, bacala, had polenta with a cod. You had to get that salt cod, and you have to soak it for a few days to get the salt out of it. That was kind of something we always had. Chestnuts, we like to roast chestnuts, kind of, because chestnuts are, from what I understand, chestnuts, people got tired of chestnuts because they ground it up for flour. And chestnuts were kind of replaced wheat, or didn't replace wheat, that was what they used instead of wheat, or corn, in that part of Italy. So we'd have chestnuts, you know, kind of roast them in the fire and or in the oven. And sabayon, which is egg yolks, sugar, and you mix into that muscat, the wine, and you kind of whip that up a little bit, put it over a double boiler, and kind of a creamy, lighter thing. So that was kind of a traditional drink that we had also. Okay. I think, wait a minute. Okay, just a few more, just about done. There was a lot of people who lived around here. So on the 4th Street, you have Pazzanas, Tagliattis, who only spoke Italian, Benaldi's. Next to Benaldi was Pai Gamara. Next to her was Fedina Bertino. Next to them was King Muss and Teresa Muss. So that was kind of that 4th Street was where the Italians were living. Up in the Tianaway Valley, if you go up the valley, there was right from the schoolhouse, which is now the Ballard, whatever. Right below that, my uncle had a place there that he kind of rented some people out. But anyway, but up the valley from there was a family called Ganeros. Then beyond them was Corollos. There was Orsos, Imanettos, Crisettos. So that valley, you go up there, was all Italians all the way up the valley. Then you go up the Middle Fork. Up the Middle Fork there was Basolis, and then Favros, and then beyond Favros you go up between the West Fork and Middle Fork. They called that Lucarna, which was the same village that my grandparents came from. They named it the same thing. We're going to Lucarna to look for mushrooms. Notable Italians from here. There was Louis Bruno, born in Walsall in 1907. attended WSU at the age of 15, became 3-time superintendent of public instruction, 3 terms, 1960 and 1972. 1907, born in Roslyn, Louis Bruno. Bocce, right here. The Polino, which we call the Baching. Why the Baching? I don't know where that come from. It's called the Polino, so we call it the Polino. The object is to get this ball closest to this one we're throwing at.
It's a target.
Okay? If you're closer, you get the point. If you're farther away, then the red ball's closer, the red ball gets the point. Okay? Now, we have high-tech stuff, you know, tape measures now. Even then there's arguments. You can imagine you take arguments, you take a stick rather than a tape measure and add a couple glasses of wine to it, and you can see where the argument is coming. There was, down across from the mill, there was a bocce court over there. And they played there quite often. At some point in time, again, another story from my dad, that it kind of ended the bocce over there when somebody came home with a bloody nose because they got in a scrap down there and it wasn't too nice. So that ended that court. Then then the court moved from there over to where the senior center is right now. And they had a nice court over there, and eventually that went away. Senior center came in and that took care of that. But bocce is an Italian sport, and we're gonna have a bocce tournament here in
August 3rd,
August 3rd.
South Cleveland.
So, Maria's involved in, Mike's involved with getting that organized. And we'll have the rules all ready to go. Okay,
And what does bocce mean? That's bocce.
coach.
What does it mean? It means ball. He goes, that's ball.
You know, growing up here, everybody kind of, it was a community, it still is. Okay, we now have the sons and daughters of Italy in America. We have a lodge here. The Cleveland Lodge was founded in 1947. And you can see a few of the old names on there, charter members of it. So we kind of try to keep that Italian heritage alive. Keep it, we still want to, spread that, keep that, I don't know, spread it, but just keep that Italian heritage going. Remember our past, I guess, and work towards the future. So we kind of do that with our organization, and it's really a lot of fun. You don't even have to be Italian to join it. You can just be a social member, or come in and have dinner once a month and visit. It's kind of fun. Couple things. I'm not going to go. 2 sentences and I'm done with this. There's, Columbus Day was always it's like an Italian national holiday for us. Those of Italian heritage, Columbus Day was a source of pride. Seattle had a Columbus Day parade at one time. And then a few years ago, they threw it out, and I don't care if they want Indigenous People Day, but have it. But don't replace Columbus. So, anyway, I don't know, we're living in a time right now that's, you kind of wonder, they want to kind of get rid of, get Columbus out, or he's not a good guy. Anyway, that's it for that part of it. We relied upon one another here in this community, and I'm not done yet. We have one more. Father Ed was not Italian, but I think he would like to have been Italian. Anybody remember Father Ed? Father Ed was a priest here for 35 years or something like that. And just about dinner time, not every day. Father Ed would show up. There was always some food that Father Ed would, he'd come in and we had dinner, whatever we had. One day we had mushrooms, and we only had a few on this big table, quite a few of us. So my mom, you kids, when the mushrooms come by, it's no thank you. Gets around Father Ed, and he says, "What's wrong with these mushrooms?" But after we'd eat, this was before television. He'd get out his violin, he played the violin. My brother had an accordion, and they'd make some sort of music together there between the violin and accordion. It was fun to listen to. Then he smoked them doggone cigars, green, about that big around, and green as could be. I must have came straight from Havana, I'm sure. And I don't know, he was quite one more character in this growing up that we had. Okay. This is one of a couple books. One, I just read this. I read it. Kathy's reading it right now. The Betrothed. This is set in northern Italy, in Venice. Excuse me, not Venice. In Milano, and this is the Great Plague of Milano, by Alessandro Manzoni. It describes Italy in the 1500s and what life was like there. Tell you, we have a great life, and we better stop complaining about it because life was tougher there than it is now. And so, if you want to read a good book, this I would highly recommend it. Okay, I think I have.